This is Rosie's bones. In one of those places in the world that's completely flat, with a sky that's mostly white, there's a town. And there's one road leading into the town this way and one road leading out that way, far as the eye can see in both directions. Now, the first house in town, if you're going out this way, or coming in this way, or the last house in town, if you're going out that way, is a cottage that has been built by generations of hands with an almost mythical understanding of how things fit together to make bigger things. Now, there's one big room inside, and all along one wall is like a tool bench. There's tools hanging on the wall and tools laying out nice and neat, and underneath are crates with extra tools and spare parts, anything you might need. There's a fireplace as large as a large person that fits together. There's no wind comes through, even though not a drop of mortar was used in its making. There's a sturdy dining room table with chairs around it. And those chairs are very, very sturdy, but not a single original splinter is left of the chairs that they were first. There's a door off to one side that leads to a kitchen and a couple other doors that lead to small bedrooms. And in one of those bedrooms is where our hero was born. Her parents leaned over their brand new bundle and they whispered her name for the first time, Adora. And she did that thing babies do where they look at you cross-eyed and they explode out of both directions at the same time, telling them exactly what she thought of that name. So from then on, they called her Addie. And Addie is how she introduced herself, and Addie is what folks called her. Now, Addie had a big red hair that obeyed directions about as well as she did, which is to say not at all. And she didn't have freckles plural, she had freckles singular. And Addie grew up in this house with all these people who know how to build things, right? Okay, bear with me this. Addie, human souls were kind of shaped like puzzle pieces. All of us got a puzzle piece inside. And that puzzle piece has some innie bits that are just waiting to be filled by someone or something else. And we've got outie bits that are looking for someone else's innie bits to fill up. Well, Addie, she didn't sleep too well, but other than that, she was born with all outie bits. She didn't need nothing to fill any innie bits. She didn't need nothing from anyone else. Well, we all know what happens to a perfectly self-sufficient woman when she meets someone with a deep need. When our story begins, Addie's a grown woman. She wakes up every morning with the sunrise. She makes herself a cup of tea, scoops an egg out from under a hen. And after breakfast, she ties her hair into submission, and she goes out into her garden, and she waits. And while she waits, she digs up potatoes, and she climbs up on the roof to patch it up for the winter. And she harvests the juiciest tomatoes you've ever seen. She tosses the scraps to her chickens. She's got the eggiest, meatiest flock in town. They're also the noisiest. It's chicken math, that's how that goes. And so while Addie is doing what most of us would call working and what she calls waiting, she's got an ear out. She's listening. She's listening for folks coming up her road. Because you see, people bring her their wind-up toys and clocks and that particular genus of kitchen gadget that only does one thing. Because you see, Addie can hear the song of those machines. She can hear where they're broken, and she can hear, when she's done with them, the song of their wholeness. And that song, that is all Addie has ever needed. See, people, when we break, our parts just, you can't fix us, right? Our parts just go on singing off key until we stop singing altogether. But gadgets, doohickeys, machines, those you can fix. Those are Addie's jam. Well, one day, a stranger comes into town. Everyone say, dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. And Addie hears about this stranger because everyone's whispering and giggling about him. He strolls in and he's got this walk that is a walk. And his pants are perfectly tailored. This is a combination that everyone of all genders agrees is a delight to behold. No one's sad to see him come in, but no one's really that sad to watch him walk away either. When he greets people, he says everyone's name exactly how they say it. He gets it right every time. And he tips his hat like he went to Cowboy Cotillion. Well, Addie, she hears all these whispers. She doesn't think anything of it. Oh, yeah, whatever, because, gossip travels faster than wild horses in these flat lands. So she's like, no big deal, until he comes strolling up her path. He comes and he stands at her gate and he says, he tips his hat. Hello. And Addie says, oh. Hello. I'm Addie. And he says, well, hello, Addie. Addie, the pleasure is mine. And her insides melted. And he said, folks around here say you're the one to come to when something needs fixing. And Addie said, yeah, it's me fixing things for people left and right. And he said, wonderful. You see, Miss Addie, I'm a wanderer. But lately in my wandering, something's been missing. I think I'm lonely. And the way Addie heard that word lonely was like it was in lights with sparkles. Lonely. And he said, I think I need a, and Addie's mouth said, me. And then her brain said, who said that? That was dumb. Oh my God, did I say that? Oh! Okay, fix it, we fix things, fix it. And she forced her mouth to say, a music box, a music box. That's what you need, a music box. Long, lonely wandering, kind of fill the silence on those long, lonely wandering. And his face lit up like a light had switched on inside. His eyes got wide, his eyebrows tilted just a little bit off, a little bit asymmetrical. And he said, Addie, I think that might just be the thing. Could you make me one? Would you? And Addie said, oh yeah, I've got all the parts you need. For the music box, I've got that I can do. And he said, wonderful. And he turned and he strolled away, and Addie watched him stroll away. And then she got to work. She went to that long tool bench. She pulled out some extra parts. She kind of laid everything out, some gears and some dials and some springs, and she got her tools out and she looked at it all. I'm going to move it here, right here. She looked at it all. And she freaked out because the first time in her life, she was looking at something she did not know how to fix. Because you can't fix something doesn't exist yet. And there was no music box here. Well, she took her mama's advice. She let it ruin her day for 5 whole minutes. A music box? I don't know music from a hen's cackle. What in the world am I supposed to do? I don't know how to build a music box. I fix things. I fix broken things. I don't just make things. I don't just make music boxes. What was I thinking? And then she thought about the way his eyebrows tilt. And she thought, okay, I can fix this. And she picked up this one and this one. And she listened to them together. No. Yes. Gear, to coil, to spring, listening, all the while listening for that song of how they wanted to fit together. And when she finished, she closed it all up in 5 wooden sides and a lid and desire. Well, that stranger came strolling up her path. She handed him the music box and his eyes grew wide, his face lit up. He said, oh, Addie, I think this is just the thing. Thank you. And he strolled away, and Addie watched him stroll away. But a few days later, he came back. He was carrying that music box. And he said, Miss Addie, thank you so much for this music box. It's real nice. It shines like magic in a campfire, and it plays real pretty, but, well, I'm still lonely. Lights, sparkles. I think I need and Addie's mouth said, a date. And then her brain said, who said that? Oh my God, was that me again? Ah, fix it. And she forced her mouth to say, a A dog? Yes. A dog. You need a dog. A kind of constant companion on the road, man's best friend kind of thing, A dog will fix it all for you. And he said his eyebrows tilted and his eyes got wide and his face lit up like a light had been switched on inside. And he said, oh, Miss Addie, I do think that might be the thing. Could you? Would you? And Addie said, oh, yeah, definitely. And he strolled away and she watched him stroll away. And then she freaked out immediately. A dog? A dog? You can't just make a dog? What in the world am I thinking? I don't know a dog from a deadbolt. What in the world? Why would I promise this ridiculous thing? She let it ruin her day for 15 whole minutes. And then she thought about the way his face lit up. And she thought about his eyes. And she said, I can fix this. I can fix anything. But the problem with dogs is that dogs are people too. And people, as we know, are not Addie's jam. You can't see inside them. You can't just take them apart, fix them, put them back together again. Well, you can, but it generally doesn't go well. But she thought, what if there was a dog that I could see inside? What if I made a dog that I could fix? She got a vision of sitting on the rug in front of a roaring fire with a sturdy hand on her shoulder and some warm legs to lean back on, and parts in front of her as she tinkers away, turning an old off-key dog back into a youthful pup. She waits for the full moon. Not because she really believes that the full moon is magic, like people say, but if it is, she could use every ounce of magic she could possibly get. When the full moon comes, she pulls on her tromping boots. She gets a big old burlap sack, ties it to her belt, and she goes out tromping behind the butcher shop, which is pretty much the only way to get bones without doing something very smelly. Out behind the butcher shop, everything's kind of organized into piles, which is very convenient. Everything has been cleaned of its meat and it's been boiled for gelatin, and it's all very clean and not very smelly at all, which is a relief, to be honest. So she starts gathering. She gets a cow's tailbone for a spine and some goat ribs and the kind of bits and pieces she thinks might be useful. She tucks them all into that bag and she tromps back to her house with that bag kind of clacking next to her. She lays everything out. So the work table, right? She pulls out those bins from underneath. She's got all her tools and she gets to work. And she starts listening to those bones as she puts them together, listening for how they want to fit together. And when she doesn't have the right part, she reaches into those extra spare parts underneath and she fits them together, bone to gear to bone to coil, until she's got a dog. When she's done, she wraps it all up in sort of a patchwork of leather. She smooths it all out with beeswax. And she sets it up on its haunches. It is not cute. But it is a dog. Well, it's dog-shaped. She reaches around behind for its tail and she cranks its tail until all of a sudden that tail is cranking itself. And that dog turns its empty eye sockets up to Rosie, or not Rosie, to, who is this, Addie, up to Addie. And it opens its mouth in what probably should be a bark, but this dog does not have a voice box or lungs. And that tail wag turns into a whole butt wag, which turns into a whole body wag. And that dog reaches up and it puts its paws right here on Addie's hips. And if Addie leans down and she presses her forehead to the soft leather of its face and she says, "It worked! You worked! Oh, good dog! Good dog!" Well, she goes around her business, right? But that dog follows her everywhere. Out in the garden, chasing the chickens, everywhere. And at night, when Addie goes to bed, well, that dog jumps right up with her. And it turns itself once, twice, 3 times, and settles into the crook of her body. And she drapes her arm over it. And for the first time in her life, she falls asleep right away and dreams. She dreams of her grandfather putting together the pieces of a clock. She dreams of her mother explaining the difference between a socket and a ratchet. The stranger came back, comes strolling down the path, and Addie introduces him. I've been calling her Rosie. She's a good girl. Aren't you? Yeah. Anyway, you don't gotta feed her. I built a self-winding mechanism into her tail, so you don't gotta feed her. You just gotta make her happy once or twice a day, and she'll wind herself. You know, wag, 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 wind, wind, wind. You get it? And his face lights up, and he says, oh, Addie, she's great. I think this dog might just be the thing. And he strolls away, and Addie watches him stroll away. And then it is too quiet. Without that Rosie following her around. And she goes back to not sleeping so good, not remembering her dreams. But, you know, the stranger's happy. And then he comes back with Rosie next to him. And he says, Addie, Rosie's real great. She, I don't gotta feed her. She plays fetch. She's a real good sleeping companion in front of the campfire at night. But Miss Addie, I'm still lonely. And for the first time, Addie lets herself actually meet his eyes for more than a moment. And in that more than a moment, she sees deep inside his pupils apertures, like in a camera. And she realizes the pieces fit together, that synchronous stroll of his, and the perfect, precise tip of his hat, the way he says everyone's name exactly how they said it. And finally, over the pounding in her ears, she can hear the song of a machine that is broken. Well, she gets to work. She peels off his clothes, which went pretty much how she'd imagined it. And then she peels off his skin, which she had never imagined. And inside, he is a mess. And a masterpiece. Blood and oil, gears and joints, sinew and spring, all together. And here, right there, she sees it. Right here, in the place where your soul aches when it's thirsty. A puzzle piece. Perfectly flat on every side, except for one where a nearby spring has been wearing away. Just a little any spot. Well, she fills that up with a little sliver of wood from the music box and one of Rosie's toe bones. Sorry, girl. And she puts that all together and she ties it all together with a lock of her own curly hair. She spends about a week taking them all apart, laying all the parts out. And then she spends another week putting it all back together again. And in between, she spends a few days throwing plates at the chickens. Not at the chickens, but like in their vicinity, because it is very satisfying. I'm just so stupid. And he's so stupid. And it's just not fair. And now I'm out of plates. Well, she puts them all back together again. And she puts his clothes on reluctantly. And she sets him up in one of those sturdy dining room chairs, and she sits back against the wall. She kind of slumps. She's been a long couple of weeks, and she slumps back. And she waits. And as she waits, And Rosie comes up and circles 1, 2, 3 times and curls up right next to her. And Addie throws her arm over that dog and falls asleep. When Addie wakes up, the sun is setting. Her eyes are all crusty with shop dust and rage tears. She's got to kind of clear that out. She sits up, and her hair sits up with her. And he's sitting there on that chair with his hat in his hands, smiling. He says, "Oh, Miss Addie, thank you so much. There is nothing I could do that would repay what you've done for me." And Addie says, "Nothing? Like, are you sure? Nothing? Well, a corner of his mouth quirks up and he says, "Sorry, I ain't built that way. But take care of Rosie for me, would you?" Addie nods and her hair nods with her. And he stands up like a well-oiled machine because you know that she lubed every cubic inch. He stands up and he goes, here's what it looks like. He goes to the door. Now it's sunset outside, right? So we got pink and amber and gold. The doorway's here, it's dark inside. And he goes and he strolls up to the door and he turns and he gives one final hat tip. And then he strolls away out of the cottage. Laddie scrambles up and runs after him just to watch him walk away one last time. And she watches until the sunset swallows his silhouette. She looks down at her dog. Rosie looks back up and grins a lipless grin and whines herself. Hattie says, "Well, Rosie, I guess it's just you and me, huh? Let's go to bed." And Addie walks past the sleeping chickens and through the fragrance of tomato vines and into her cottage with Rosie's bones beside her. Thank you.